Now, we've known for a while that Microsoft had some interest in working with Nintendo and potentially buying them, but did they have the money? Now we got the emails. They come from 2020. Microsoft's Phil Spencer was talking with other people at Microsoft about purchasing Nintendo. Spencer said Nintendo was seen as the, quote, or I should say, they saw Nintendo as, quote, the prime asset, end quote, for Microsoft to go after. So Microsoft's like, if we really want to make our name in gaming and make an acquisition that will bolster us, Nintendo is the top. They're like, Nintendo is the one we want. Are there other companies that make a big difference? Sure. But if we could actually woo Nintendo, that'd be something else. Because they're like, if there's ever going to be an American company that could potentially get Nintendo, it's going to be Microsoft. And I agree with them on that. There are other companies in America that Nintendo might work with. But as far as scooping them up, yeah, it's Microsoft. That's it. Microsoft's the only one that really has the money, too. Maybe Activision, but Activision wouldn't buy Nintendo. Spencer also went on to talk about all the different hurdles that are in the way of making that happen because Nintendo famously, in a previous meeting, laughed when they were asked about potentially being bought. Nintendo straight out laughed at them and was like, no, that's not going to happen.
In an email, they laughed, or
in
like
person.
So who's the person that laughed?
I would probably Yamauchi back then, their oldest president that I remember, because he was Yamauchi or Yamauchi, however you say it. He was rough, man. Like, he was a really rough
no nonsense businessman,
but like in a bad way.
Like ruthless?
Not ruthless, just like very cold.
Speaking of, do you know the story behind Lisa Frank? Like her business?
I imagine her as a unicorn.
Well, of course. Well, maybe after show, I'll tell you about the TikTok
there's a little
I saw.
teaser for you. Remember that. Don't forget that.
I won't remember that.
I will. I'll do my best. Lisa Frank is never far from my mind, so I'll remember.
Or your heart.
Or my heart. Yeah, they said there were hurdles in the way. Also, they said they're not going to go with, quote, hostile action, end quote, to snag Nintendo. Which I really appreciate, because hostile takeovers are a thing. They wanted to get Nintendo.
Especially in soap operas.
They wanted to get Nintendo. They know they got the money to do it, because Nintendo's got money, but they don't have Microsoft money. Microsoft could go in and do a hostile takeover of Nintendo. They could 100% do it. And they could be like, we don't care what you think. We're buying you. And that's that. That can happen in the business world.
How is that legal? Or how is that
a publicly traded company? You can do it. There's still legal red tape and everything, but a hostile takeover is they buy just enough percentage of the company where they're the majority stakeholder, and that's it.
Isn't there? I was reading.
It almost happened to Ubisoft. A year and a half ago, it almost happened to Ubisoft.
Huh.
But it can happen. You got the money.
Is there a board, like the board of directors is going to accept a high bid, or it's like there's no choice?
When you're the majority stakeholder, it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
If you're the majority owner in a company, you strong arm all the long story short, unfortunately, how it is. And again, there's a whole bunch of nuance here that I don't know and things I don't get, but I know hostile takeovers. All that matters is if you got enough money, you can make it happen. That's it.
I was reading something and I didn't understand any of it, so it might be wrong. But
do I have to be?
Can't the Japanese government do something to step in and stop that? Because Nintendo's got to mean a lot to the Japanese people.
There can be paths to stymieing it in that, where it's like, from a cultural perspective and the cultural significance and the the revenue that Nintendo brings into Japan as a country. Yes, there are things that could happen where, it's the same thing that's going on with Microsoft right now with Activision. Like, there's things that step in and like, this is a monopoly. This is unfair business practice. So there can be things where potentially Nintendo or Microsoft would have to legally go in and do some battles, but they got the money to do it and the time to burn. So yeah. But I do respect that they said they would not go the hostile route.
Man, that would stink.
Because you don't want to be like, hey, we really want to work with you. And Nintendo's like, no. And then they're like, well, you're doing it anyway. Because then why would Nintendo be like, why would they, that's morale down. People will leave the company, all that crap.
Yeah. And, obviously we would try it out, but we would probably fall off as gamers too, when we realize that.
You would think.
Their hearts aren't in it. and it's disappointing content.
Also, Phil Spencer ends the email by saying something that is so it shows
Peace, Spence.
how little he understands Nintendo's philosophy. Here's what Phil Spencer knows. Nintendo has a
That's
lot
what he
of
said.
fantastic IP, and Nintendo knows how to make games. Those are the two things Phil Spencer knows. But what he ends his email with shows that he doesn't know Nintendo at all. He says, I love this discussion and value you looking at the opportunities here. At some point, getting Nintendo would be a career moment for him, he's saying, which would be true, yeah. And I honestly believe a good move for both companies. It's just taking a long time for Nintendo to see that their future exists off their own hardware. A long time, smiley face. Him saying it takes a long time, it's taking Nintendo a long time for them to see that their future exists off their own hardware shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how Nintendo operates. Nintendo has their own hardware because they are so different from the other companies. Nintendo's hardware exists for them to make the kind of games that they want and do what they want to do. Nintendo's hardware is a core tenet of what Nintendo does. How you are so blind to that is unbelievable.
They're
to me.
coming from a place where they haven't changed the fundamental, console that they've put out over the last 3 generations. You could get every single game ever on those 3 systems on their latest system. They're not doing anything like out of the box. And every single time, Nintendo has come up with something new that has advanced the video game industry. I don't know how you could say something like that, especially sounding so intelligent in the beginning, actually, admitting that Nintendo is killing it, because not very many people on Sony and Microsoft side will say that, and then end it with like the poop sandwich.
That's a smug statement. Yeah. It shows that like Nintendo makes all the weird things and all the random things and all the out of the box things they do because of their own hardware, because they don't have to answer to anyone. All they have to answer to is the business side of their own company. Do we have the money to do this? Okay, we're doing it. That's how you get Nintendo Labo. That's how you get Animal Crossing. That's how you get Wii Fit. That's how those things exist, because Nintendo does their own hardware and they make what they want. They have to answer to no one. If they're at Microsoft could say until they're blue in the face, you guys do whatever you want. But if Nintendo does whatever they want to a certain degree and it doesn't hit the sales marks that Microsoft wants, then money's going to be pulled and things are going to be stopped. That's just how business works. When you're answering to a bigger entity, you don't get free reign from now until the end of time to do whatever you want. There's going to be a point where someone in the chain of command says, no, you can't do that. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the money. We don't want to give you the assets to do that. That's how it works. That's why Nintendo's hardware is so important to them, because they do so much more outside of the box thinking than the other companies. How you miss that mark, I don't understand it. But
we're talking about the company that just leaked their own future for the next 4 years. So
yeah. Also, it's a whole thing of like fundamentally misunderstanding games from a perspective or from taking the perspective of only power matters, because they're like, we have, our hardware is so much more powerful. Of course, there's emails that leaked as part of this or again, didn't leak, that were accidentally shared. Part of this where Microsoft talking about how they were worried about Sony showing off the PS5. And then after Sony, bless you, after Sony showed it, Microsoft, it's like, we're in the clear, guys. We got the better system. We're 30% more powerful.
Well, they come from
How do you think that?
They come from a world of computing where that does matter, because you're just computing the same BS or whatever. But if it comes to the content that can be run on that system, then it's not all about
the power. Doesn't matter. The content is what matters. Now, here's the other thing. How are you Microsoft and you say that while also releasing the Xbox Series S? Because that's not as powerful. Like, that's lesser than the Xbox Series X. So any game that comes out on X has to work for S. I don't get how you can say, woo, we're more powerful than Sony's system. You know what the split is between S and X sales? 70-something% S. 70-something%. I don't remember what it is exactly, but I know it's 70%. So 70% of your customers went with the less powerful system because of the price.
That's interesting. And if they learn anything from that, it won't be that lesson that you just taught.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, oh, people love digital gaming or something, and
Yeah.
that's what the lesson's going to be. I almost thought it was an experiment to see what would do better, and then go with digital gaming after it does 70% better. But obviously, it's going to do better because it's so
Well,
less.
you're
expe-
not
much
wrong
less expensive.
because their refresh showed off an Xbox Series X without a disk drive. So
Oh, well,
that's
there you go.
what they're seeing. You're exactly right. So it is what it is. But interesting stuff. Not fun for Microsoft this week, but all kinds of insight we don't usually get. There was one I'm not talking about in top stories, but I will reference it. Where Microsoft was very honest, where they're like, guys, we're publishers and we're dinosaurs. Like, like our time is over. They're like, now that we have digital and nobody really saw it coming, what's the point of a publisher? You needed a publisher back in the day to get your game on store shelves and like get boxes and all that. Now they have a direct line to the consumer. They're like, we're just scrambling and hanging on to make money. Like, our time's over. And back then, they were saying when digital just first started to become a thing, no one at these companies decided to, or Microsoft specifically says, no one at our company decided to look at that and be like, what's our place now? How do we factor in here? What do we do? How do we adjust for this? How do we make sure that we don't get aged out of this part of the industry? And no one did anything. They didn't look at it. They just didn't do anything. So they were just speaking amongst each other very frankly about it, being like, our point now is kind of silly because they don't need us to put their games out because there's digital. We don't need
company are you
publishers.
talking about?
Microsoft.
Oh, so is Devolver Digital a publisher?
Yeah.
But they're working on such a niche at such a niche level that they are needed, or
Well, still a publisher will get, they'll help you get your game out in front of people and all that stuff. But what Microsoft is saying, back in the day, a publisher was 100% necessary because all you had was physical. All you had was retail.
Okay,
You
right.
needed a partner to get in there because they were the one that would pay for boxes and promotional materials and printing of the cartridges or the discs. Like, developers didn't have that money.
PlayStation 1
especially,
disc.
especially if they were smaller. But yeah, nowadays you don't need a publisher at all. Like, you don't need one. You can go with Devolver Digital, and yes, they have expertise and they can help you get through the submissions process. Like, there's a reasons to have them, but
And
you
they've
don't.
got the
You don't need them.
the robot that robot that makes the games
Volvi,
too.
yeah, you're right.
Oh,
But
Volvi.
you don't need them. You do not need a publisher. You can self-publish, which we see plenty of companies plenty of developers do. A publisher is 100% not necessary nowadays, other than in name only, because you would self-publish your own game. Stardew Valley. That was published by another company for a while, but that's a self-published game now. So publisher's time is up. Yeah.
Time's
Developers'
up.
time is now. King Brawley says, I imagine Sony or Google or Apple or Tencent would love to do the same. So I'm not really bothered by what he said, even though a lot probably are. No regulator on earth would allow it as things stand now. Money talks. Money talks. I don't know.